All right. Well, with that, we will begin. So, good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you all. My script says good afternoon. That's not right. So, good morning, everyone. My name is David Chudnow. On behalf of Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh, I want to welcome you to this commemorative Torah study session. We honor the lives lost and the people affected by the attack on the three congregations, Dor Chadash, New Light, and Tree of Life, or L'Simcha, on October 27, 2018, which was the 18th of Cheshvan, 5779. Our Torah study today is dedicated in memory of the 11 people who perished on that day 3 years ago. So please rise if you're able as we recite their names. Joyce Feinberg, Edith Baltcha bat Abba Menachem, Richard Gottfried, Yosef ben Chaim, Rose Malinger, Razel bat Abraham, Jerry Rabinowitz, Yehuda ben Yechezkel Selma, Cecil Rosenthal, Cecil Chaim ben Eliezer, David Rosenthal, David ben Eliezer, Bernice Simon, Bela Rachel bat Moshe, Sylvan Simon, Zalman Shachna ben Menachem Mendel, Daniel Stein, Daniel Abraham ben Baruch, Melvin Wax, Moshe Gadol ben Yosef, Irving Younger, Yitzchak Chaim ben Menachem. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing. You may be seated. Please, a few things to note. First of all, this session is being recorded. And there are also closed captioning. There is closed captioning available at the bottom of your screen. And if there are any members of the press here, please note that this session is off the record. I now invite Rabbi Jeffrey Myers of Congregation Tree of Life, or L'Simcha, to introduce our scholar, Hazzan Matthew Austerklein.
Thank you, David. Matt Austerklein is a prayer leader, musician, and scholar exploring the religious meaning of Jewish musical forms. A congregational cantor for over a decade, Matt has worked in diverse pastoral, life cycle, and educational settings. He serves as a mentor to new and student cantors and works on projects shaping the Jewish musical future. He is also a multiple genre artist of contemporary and classic Jewish music. Matt is currently a PhD candidate in Jewish studies at Halle-Wittenberg University in Germany, writing his dissertation from his home in Akron, Ohio. He is currently an ELS research fellow and was recently a Jewish Wisdom Fellow with Mechon Hadar. He is married to Rabbi Alyssa Joy Austerklein, and they have 2 children. My pleasure to welcome to Pittsburgh my friend and colleague Hazzan Matt Austerklein.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Myers. And thank you to the Pittsburgh Federation and to both of you for inviting me to be here today. It was on this day 3 years ago, not only the tragic murders at the 3 synagogues in Pittsburgh, the 3 communities, but also it was the day on the other side of things, because we Jews do simcha and tragedy together. It was the day I brought home my daughter from the hospital, and she turned 3 on Monday. And so I feel particularly moved to be able to honor the memories of those whose lives were lost, and to teach Torah in this small tikkun that through the teaching of Torah we can help create a world that our children will inherit, that is a little bit more kind and a little bit more safe, and that we can, from the Torah that we learn in every day, have a better shared society and more healing. So with that, I'm going to start, because this is a session about healing and music, with an nigun. So learn along and join with me as we sing. Yam yada dai dai, yada dai dai, oy oy oy. Yam yada dai dai, Ambadadai, oyaidam. Ayadadai, ayadadai, ayoyoy. Yam badadai dai yam yadadai dai hai dai dam yam dadadai dai yam dadadai dai hai ai ai yam dadadai dai yam dadadai dai hai ai yam yum da 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 yum da 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 hi yi hum da 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 yum da 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 hi yi tiddy dum dum hi na 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 hi na 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 ya na tiddy dum dum da 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 hi yi tiddy dum dum da 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 hi yi tiddy dum dum da da dum dum ya da di da dum dum do tiddy dum dum da da dum dum ho da dum dum da yo tiddy dum dum da da dum dum oh yo 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 tiddy dum dum da da dum dum ha da dum dum da yo tiddy dum dum da dum dum ya ba bi da dim dum do ay na nay nay yam ba da nay nay ay 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 am ba da nay 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 na nay nay ay ay am ba da nay nay yam ba da nay nay ay 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 am ba da nay nay am ba da nay nay ay ay hidi dum dum ay nay nay ya na nay nay I know didi dum dum da da nay nay na na nay nay no hidi dum dum da da nay dum da da nay nay hidi dum dum da da dum dum ya da di da dum dum do hum bidi boo bum bum didi dum bum ay hum didi dum bum didi dum bum ay hum didi dum bum didi dum bum ay hum bidi boo bum bidi boo bum hi hum. Thank you. I saw some mouths moving and some smiles and some waking up spirits, which is a beautiful thing. One of the music's beautiful powers. And today's session is on music and healing from tragedy. And so, if folks want to just put in the chat, to answer a question of how music brings healing for you, whether it's in reflecting on the deep tragedies of today or in the littler, the many different ways in which we're affected by difficulty, how music holds a place for you in your healing. Well, just an opportunity to put that in the chat for a minute here and see what we're sitting with today. Some beautiful things coming in, sense of peace and calm, articulating things you can't really describe, right? It's something, it brings things to the surface. Beautiful. Ties to our ancestors, right? And the Girsa de Yankista, like the version of our souls from our youth, where we have our songs that bring that out. Brightening the spirit, connecting to the past. That's so true. I've felt that, found that, I'm sure you too, that when you're, I've visited people who even have some cognitive difficulty, or they're in a hospital setting and having a very difficult time, that you sing and then something lights up, like it brings the aliveness back to somebody. It's very beautiful. Uplifting, a space in the body and the mind and the spirit in sync, bringing unity to the self. Very beautiful. Takes to a different place so you can forget the sadness you feel, or have a reprieve, a comfort from it. You know, it creates this other world of comfort. Very beautiful. Self-reflection, absolutely. And calming, spiritual movement. All these things are part of a wonderful goodness, and a release that music brings in life. Now I'm going to ask maybe a little more challenging question, which is, and maybe from people's personal experience, there's something that rings true, which is, how does music, with all the goodness that we've described, how is it even sometimes in tension with an experience of loss or an experience of tragedy? How is it in tension? Have you ever experienced music in tension with a great moment of great difficulty or of great tragedy? This is a harder question. If there's someone who wants to share out loud on this, this is like a deeper thing, like, oh, to get back to that place where the music couldn't even cut it, right? Where the music couldn't even cut it. Yes, Doris, please. I see your hand up. You can unmute.
When my father was within about a week and a half or 2 weeks of dying, and he had always loved singing, and I learned many songs from him. And I majored in music myself. I wanted to sing to him, and he was very abrupt with me at that moment and said, "No singing." And I really thought about that, because I had learned so much music from him. He always sang in the shower. He loved to sing, along with opera arias. He took voice lessons himself. And I'm thinking, what did he mean by saying no singing? And I'm not sure I have an answer, but I think that he knew very well that he was dying, and there was something that was preventing him, because this is my assumption, he may have been holding, hoping that it was actually not true, but the idea of someone singing was just too much for him to take at that moment. And he just couldn't bear it, to know that he was leaving and would not be able to sing himself. That's one possible explanation, but I really don't have a good explanation. Never have. 10 years, more than 10 years already.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you for sharing that beautiful memory. I think it's a wonderful, testament to the power of music in his life, that he realized that in this liminal moment, there was something else that needed space, that music wasn't the right tool at that moment to experience something. I think it's also true, certainly in Jewish tradition, that we actually have a push-pull with music, right, in Jewish tradition. On the one hand, it's this beautiful sign of life and comfort and meaning, and anything, the Torah talks about the trees and all the parts of nature singing God's praises, and we see these images of the temple orchestra and pray, and that which is most spiritual and divine is associated with music. But at the same time, we have this tradition of, the temple's destruction, and when you're mourning, you're not supposed to do A, B, C, D, and E relating to music. So, actually my talk is so wonderful to move into our text for today. which I don't think we'll be able to get through all of in the next 30 minutes, but I'll try to get through a few of them. And they're available for download, of course. My goal is to really take us on a journey through both the music positive and the music negative sources. And why the negative sources? Because it's so easy to say, oh, music is great, it'll solve things, it'll make us feel good, and indeed it does. But I think at the moment of to music, or to sing or not to sing, the moment of what's a great moment to see what singing actually surfaces. And there's some great wisdom in the Jewish tradition about what is being surfaced at the moment of music. And I think that's going to be really there's some fruitful place for learning as we look into how music can be surfaced when we look and are trying to heal from great sorrow and from great tragedy like this one. And may there be no more like it. So with that, I want to open to our first source. Thank you, Carly. This is from the book of Genesis. This is the first place in which music shows up in the whole Torah, and it's a very it looks like a very dense source. It's from Genesis 4, but it really is how music emerges in the context of the descendants of Cain. If someone wants to I don't know if you can read it on the screen share. Maybe you can make it a little bit bigger, Carly, or if someone has it and we can get a reading volunteer. But just to give you some context for this, we remember that Cain is the first murderer. His is the first crime of passion. And God condemns him, as we remember, to wander the earth. And no one will kill him because he has the mark of Cain. And immediately after that story, after him killing his brother in this crime of passion and God making this punishment, we have this story of his descendants and what they do with their lives. And music shows up really interestingly in here. So can I get a reader for this source? Be looking for hands as I scroll here. Anybody? I can read it if you like, but anyone? Any hands? Dean, thank you so much. You'll just unmute and then Carly, if you can just scroll and make it easy for him.
Cain left the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he then founded a city and named the city after his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begot Mehujael, and Mehujael begot Methusael, and Methusael begot Lamech. Lamech took to himself two wives. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. Adah bore Yaval. He was the ancestor of those who dwell in tents and amidst herds. And the name of his brother was Yuval. He was the ancestor of all who play the lyre and the flute. As for Zillah, she bore Tubal-Cain, who forged all implements of copper and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, O wives of Lamech, give ear to my speech. I have slain a man for wounding me, and a lad for bruising me. Cain is avenged sevenfold, and Lamech 77-fold. Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth, meaning God has provided me with another offspring in place of Abel, for Cain had killed him. And to Seth, in turn, a son was born, and he named him Enosh. It was then that men began to invoke the Lord by name.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. And Carly, if you can just zoom out just a little bit. As long as we can see the last 20 to 25, we should be okay. Thank you. So in this, history of the inventions of Cain's line, how would you describe Cain's grandkids and great-grandkids? Like, what are they into? What are they about? And you can just unmute. I'll try to. I'm moving too fast to call on people. Any thoughts? What are these guys into? What are they about in their lives that we can, as far as Torah wants us to know?
Well, the Yubal, the ancestor of all who play the lyre and the flute, is the brother of Yabal. They're paired. Like music goes with wandering. Dwell in tents and amidst herds, because I mean, Cain has already founded a city. The people in the story are not purely nomads anymore, but Jabal's dwelling in tents and amidst herds, and his brother is, I imagine, as a counterpart, is the one making music. So it's something that like complements or supports being in the tents.
So we've got people specializing a little bit here. Thank you, Sarah. Right, we've got these complementary brothers. There's the metal guy, the metallurgy guy. There's the music guy. There's the shepherd, animal husbandry guy. There's the great ancestor who built the city. These guys are into serious stuff. I mean, and they complement each other, right? They complement each other. Other thoughts on the things that these guys including into Lamech, who we know a little more about than we get a little more about him. Or should we just get a big song that he wrote? Another thought on these guys. I have one from the chat that these guys are founders, right? They're fine. I thank you, Aya. These guys are fine. They're the founders of what we think of as like civilization, right? These are the things that human beings need to do to make the big empires, right? They need to master metals. They have to master the music. It's a part of their civilization. They master even epic poetry, as we see with Lamech, right? What's so striking to me about this source, though, is what do we make of Lamech's? How would you describe Lamech's song? This is actually the first song, arguably the first song in the Bible, other than you could say that Adam's speech when he sees Eve for the first time, is the first one, but this is a little bit longer. How would you describe this song? Cheryl says, Lamech knows the family lore about his ancestor Cain, right? He knows that God will avenge Cain sevenfold. And if you thought that God's vengeance was bad, then my vengeance is going to be worse. For me, this source is actually a bit of a tragic source in a way, in that we see all the markers of civilization, things that we see. Oh, look at that! Look at those people! They've got music. It's great. They've got tech, right? And music here is in the context of technology, right? It's innovations in how you have animals, innovations in how you work with metals. But at the end of it, we have the first song about violence from a polygamist, right? He's the first polygamist in the Bible, and he says, I killed a man for even just giving me a wound, and I killed a kid for bruising me. It's a horrible, and if you think God's vengeance is bad, mine is 11 times worse. It's a sad song. I mean, if I look at it, it's like a song of glorifying violence, and we see that in some of the civilizations around the Jews of I'm powerful, and the way that I glorify my power is through acts of violence, which is a very sad thing to be thinking about on this day. And so the tragedy of music, I think, in this source is that it's a beautiful thing, but it is not. It is beautiful. But beauty isn't the same thing as good. And beauty isn't the same thing as having a connection to God. As we see at the end here, that only after 2 generations of another line, of the line of Seth, which the rabbis say that all of humanity actually comes from that line, that after 2 generations of Seth, Seth's son is named Enosh. Adam's second other grandkid is named Enosh, which means human frailty. And it's only in that experience of Enosh, of human frailty, that people begin to call on God by name. Before reactions to, especially to this sort of coda, like what do you make of this coda to this, civilizational picture of Cain's descendants? Or for you, like, is there was an experience of difficulty something where, or God forbid, of tragedy, where God first spoke to you in a different way? So deep questions for the morning. You can put something in the chat if it comes to you. And I appreciate that we're sitting, we're in a session on music and we're sitting with, oh, this is such a music negative source that starts the Bible. Nebuch, I came for an up. But I hope that in the process of looking at, music in the context of tragedy, that, I think that what the Torah is coming to teach us is that music is beautiful, but it needs to be paired with something. Maybe it needs a partner. It needs a partner in what it's doing. So let's go to the next source, if we may. Actually, I'm going to skip down. I'm going to skip this source. This source is beautiful. Please look at it. I just want to make sure we have time. It's a source about how David is building the foundations of the temple, and then he finds this pot and he removes the pot, and all of the chaos at the foundation of creation comes out, and then he has to sing to put the chaos back. He has to put the pot back and then sing to bring himself back up. This is as a beautiful source. You should look at it. It just shows that the chaos that made us sing in the first place, or that we're getting comfort from, it's not away. We can't make it go away. It's down there. It can often just be down there, and the music is part of the healing process from it. Now let's go to section 3. Can I get a reader for these two sources? On actually the musical instrument of the flute in the Bible and what it does and what it means. I have a hand. Or someone can start reading. Oh, Rabbi Myers, please.
From Mishnah Ketubot, and a husband is obligated to feed her, to redeem her, and to bury her. Rabbi Yehuda says, even a pauper in Israel should not provide less than 2 flutes and a wailing woman. Then on to the next source below. And I will make an end in Moab, declares the Lord, of those who offer at a shrine and burn incense to their God. Therefore, my heart moans for Moab like a flute. Like a flute, my heart moans for the men of Kir Heres. Therefore, the gains they have made shall vanish, for every head is bald, and every beard is shorn. On all hands there are gashes, and on the loins sackcloth. On all the roofs of Moab, and in its squares there is naught but lamentation. For I have broken Moab like a vessel no one wants, declares the Lord.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much in giving voice to these to this Torah. So, as we think about this, I want to start with the question: why do you think? And you can just put this in the chat if it's easiest. Why do we say? Does the tradition say we should avoid music? In what circumstances? Why? Under whether it's what are the reasons that traditionally, or that you feel? The reasons for avoiding music. Often instrumental music comes under this. Vocal music sometimes gets a pass, but instrumental music, davka, there's some issues with it. Aya says it arouses too many strong emotions and represents enjoyment, right? We remember this from the wedding. We break the glass, right? No, don't be too happy. Such a Jewish thing. Don't be too happy. David adds, there's certain times of year we should be sad, right? And somehow the use of music, there's a sense it effaces that sadness, right? Maybe that was a piece of Doris. Might be perhaps a piece of your father's experience. I don't know that music would have taken him out of reckoning with the sadness at hand. Indeed, like that's the why no instruments in the destruction of the temple. They played instruments in the temple, right? So it reminds us of the sad times. And how can we do this thing that represents joy in life when we're in this space of guilt and of loss? Sarah adds beautifully, right? Music can be an escape, a vessel to another state. So music can we can be avoiding dealing with something, right? So these are these things in the tensions of Judaism around music, not just as we saw in the first source, that it's beautiful, but is beauty being beautiful good? But that in a mourning context or in a tragic context, right? Maybe it's effacing something. But I want to add this source here, which I think is so interesting, in that it adds a different, both a rabbinic and a Torah association that I think is just really telling. That goes beyond just the music bad, music makes things, it doesn't let us deal with tragedy. This Mishnah Ketubot source is talking about the obligations of a husband to their spouse. And in the context of talking about burying, Rabbi Yehuda says, even a pauper shouldn't provide less than 2 flutes at the funeral and a wailing woman. Now, who here, you can raise your hand, who here has seen or heard a wailing woman from traditional, there's at a funeral, yeah? I think this is in some, I don't know if, I actually don't know community. Rabbi Myers, which community did you experience it in?
Long Island, at Jewish cemeteries, there are rabbis who are outside the gates waiting to be there to offer prayers if one just shows. That's how these generally older gentlemen earn a living. And there are also what I used to call the ululators. There were women at beck and call, like in Hebron of old days, that would come and you'd give them each $10 or whatever, and they would wail and ululate at the grave as well with this rabbi. So you could get like a package deal of the rabbi doing the male and the women crying at the grave. And the minute it was done and you paid them the money, it's like, all right, the scene was ended. It was bizarre. To this day, you could still find it in Long Island cemeteries. Wow.
It's so interesting to think of emotional, hired mourners and Sarah adds, this is a custom in Chinese communities. Wonderful. I mean, the sort of, getting the emotion out seems to be like a traditional thing, not just in Western cultures or I think in Arabic cultures too, and in Chinese culture, right? Getting that emotion out is such an important thing that we hire people transactionally to help us do it. Or maybe they come for the mitzvah, maybe they come for the commandment. I think this is so cool that in the same context as a wailing woman are 2 flutes. That the Khalil is actually a tool in surfacing emotion in the same way that a wailing woman is. In the same breath that you would have a musical instrument at a funeral. Has anyone had musical instruments at funerals? Some people probably don't. Not anyone been to? No. I'd like to ask Carly to just go over Pache well, anyway, we're just going to play just a little bit of a wood flute. It's meant by this particular interpreter to be a biblical flute. Of course, we don't know. This is from the Temple Institute, which is a very specific hashkafa. But I just want you to hear and imagine this in the context of a funeral, of this, at least the sound of this kind of instrument. Thanks, Carly. Now, again, that's not necessarily the repertoire. We don't have it all written down. But again, it's just very telling to think about that music and musical instruments are surfacing. They're surfacing grief. They're surfacing emotion. What's really interesting also, I think, about surfacing emotion here is one of these images in the prophets in which we see the idea of the flute as something surfacing grief also comes with something very interesting and I think very touching, which is that God is speaking in Jeremiah about Moab, right? And he says, my heart moans for Moab. Now, Moab, this is a people that's very bad. Jeremiah is prophesying that they're going to have horrible things happen to them for their crimes and that they've done very bad things. But because he sees what's going to happen to them, my heart moans for Moab like a flute. Like a flute, my heart moans for the men of Kir Cheres. And it describes all of the bad things that are going to happen. You know, all of the squares are going to be full of lamentation. All the things actually in very Israel-like language that we would think about. The same type of compassion that God regularly has for the Jewish people in the prophets. We see Hashem have through the image of the flute and what the flute's mourning sounds like. We see that compassion aroused in God for the people of Moab. And indeed, later in Jeremiah, actually, God will come and say, "Ba'acharit hayamim," in the end of days, Moab will go back to its land, which is almost just like how the Jews will go back to theirs, or will go back to theirs as well. So I think this is just this image of the flute and the surfacing of emotion and grief is actually a beautiful opening for compassion. That when we have an experience in music and we're surfacing our emotions, that it's actually, even with the condemned, and these are people who God is rightfully in the prophets judging, that there's an opportunity to spread compassion in the world from the experience of music and from the experience of the flute here. Before we move on, comments or reactions? Please.
Just a quick thing. I was just thinking of it. You know, we think of Khalil, which is the flute, and a cognate clearly is, we can say the phrase Khalila, which is God forbid, is the same root as Khalil, flute. There's a connection there that I haven't fully thought out yet, but it just occurred to me. Khalila and Khalil.
Oh, interesting. Maybe it should be Chas v'Chalil. May God, may God forbid or God flute. May God's compassion be aroused as he did with the flute for Moab. Perhaps it should be something like that. Other reactions to this flute source, these flute sources? Again, this is not like a full, like, let's get the orchestra at the funeral side. But again, this opportunity that music provides for surfacing compassion and for surfacing emotion. Let's go to the next source. I think we have just enough time for, let's see if we have time for number 4. No, we only have enough time for number 5. It's a beautiful source by the Piasetzner Rebbe. Please go study it. It's wonderful. And it deals with just that, with basically that when your music comes up and you it's like it brings everything to the surface. The question is, what do you do with that emotion once it's on the surface? How do you bring it forward into the world in a holy way? And I'm sure we've all seen musical experiences which were led to action, and then musical experiences which led to complacency and inaction. So I think that's the real question. The Jewish question is, okay, you surface the music, right? Where did it go from there? Where did it go from there? So finally, can I get a reader for this, just for this first source, for the Nachman source, and then I'll read the last one. Can I get a reader for the Healing Community source from Rabbi Nachman? Doris, you had your hand up before. Do you want to try this one? Thank you so much.
Sure. So, both paragraphs, right?
Yes, please.
Know that you must judge each person with the benefit of the doubt, from Pirkei Avot 1:6. Even with someone who seems entirely wicked, you must search out in them and find a tiny bit of good, since in that tiny bit, they are not wicked. And if you can find in them a bit of good, you can judge them with charity and bring them truly to the side of merit, and even bring them to tshuva. Similarly, each person must find this goodness even in oneself, search out and collect other points of goodness, and through this process, they will become nigunim, melodies, the essence of plucking good spirit from a depressed spirit. It is true that the song of holiness is so very high, as is known, and that the essence of this nigun comes from the elicitation of the good from the bad. It is by eliciting the points of goodness from the bad that nigunim and songs come about. By Nachman of Breslav in Likutei Mohoran.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Doris. Reactions to this source? open up if someone wants to unmute.
May I make a
Please.
quick comment,
Please.
which is that it's very much sort of the essence of Reb Nachman in a way, because he was known to have a battle all the time with depression, and so the idea, I mean, it sounds like partly like his personal way of trying to help himself and thereby help other people was to find ways, even the smallest bit of something hopeful or something meaningfully uplifting in himself, which apparently was probably the hardest thing for him to do when he was really depressed. But that bit of goodness helps to bring about that nigunim, or melodies that can then uplift. You know, in other words, we started by saying whether music was good or not good, and there were, all these different ideas, but we're with Reb Nachman, we're talking about the opposite, whether goodness itself can help produce music that will be uplifting and that will lead you further towards goodness. That's how I see this source.
Beautiful. Beautiful. It's a beautiful read, Doris. Thank you. Thank you. Other responses to this text? Jerry.
Yeah, I'd say at funerals, doesn't matter who the person was or what their lives were like, the clergy's going to find something good to say about them.
There's always that Nakuda Tova, right? That when you're singing someone's last song, as people do in a eulogy, you want to make sure that you're stringing together. Not always. I mean, from my own experience, it's not always so simple that it's always Nakuda Tova. But you're right that you want the melody to be what people remember of this person, the lessons they'll learn for their own lives from this person, and that their last song is made up of these Nikudot Tovot, of these good points from their lives. It reminds me of like living by what it is, what you want in your tombstone rather than what you want in your resume, right? That's the melody. Other reactions? Do I have a hand? Is that David? Please.
I think looking at this and juxtaposing it with like the first text that we looked at, and that we started by saying that, song comes from glorifying the bad and the evil and the destruction. And this is the opposite in saying that yeah, song can come from the negative, but it's pulling the good out of the bad and seeing where's the goodness in where can we find these little bits of goodness, and that's what creates music and song, and it's finding those good points. So it's sort of, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, we started very misnugdish. We started very like, well, we had all this powerful technology, and the song didn't amplify the bad stuff, not the good stuff. And now we're like, oh wait, it's in turning what the either the self-image of bad, or in looking at the bad world and finding the good, that music, that's the melody we want to sing, not just avoiding the melody because we know it deals with the bad as well, right? We know where it can efface the bad. Beautiful. Other responses to this text? Indeed, I'll add that in some way, and I owe this insight to my wife, Rabbi Alyssa Austerklein, that in some ways the theology of music for Jews is also a theology of the Yetzer Hara. And I mean that in both the positive and the negative, right? The Yetzer Hara is the passions. And the rabbis say that without the Yetzer, there would be no people building houses, no people having children, no continuity of life. But that part of us, that emotional part of us, that part of us is manifest in some ways in music. And whether we see it as bad, like the beginning, or perhaps, as the way of we channel it into beauty, and we channel where our passions are coming from, all of our sadness, our emotions, that music is an opportunity to channel that in a direction of goodness. I want to go scroll down to the last source just so you can, and this is a story that is known, I think, from it was from 1991, but it was published in this book, Not by the Sword, How a Cantor and His Family Transformed a Klansman. It was the story of this man, Larry Trapp, who I know that Rabbi Myers has probably heard of, who was in Lincoln, Nebraska, was a KKK Grand Dragon, and a cantor Michael Weiser, through persistence and calling him all the time, eventually represented an offer of love, of a love that this man had never experienced, that he had just devoted his life to the H word and to making people feel less and feeling unsafe for their color of their skin. So I just want to read as a closing of sorts, this song that was written in honor for a Martin Luther King Jr. service that this now ex-Klansman attended in Lincoln, Nebraska, after his transformation through the love and care of this Jewish family. He actually ended up converting to Judaism, I think, in the latter part of his life, and disavowing all of his speech. And this is by Leslie Young, who unfortunately actually just passed away in August of this year. So in her memory, this is her song. I wish I had the music. I actually tried to get in touch with the family, but this is the song as published. Look what love has done, turned a stone heart into gold, made a new life out of old. Anyone can plainly see that it was love that set you free. Now we're brothers, you and I, and I'll love you till I die. We are brothers all because what love has done. It used to be you hated me, you didn't understand that every race and every man were fashioned by his hand, that we're all the same within, neath the color of our skin. Yes, you and I were all the same to him. Look what love has done. When I look into your eyes and you smile, I realize what a miracle there'd be if this whole world would come to see the greatest gift of all is to answer to love's call. Yes, we are brothers all because what love has done. So we'll conclude with the nigun, but in conclusion of our Torah, I hope that this encounter with tragedy and what music can surface for all of us is a real call for the opportunity to see the goodness in others, especially in a time and in an environment where the way that some parts of the internet operate, the way some parts of our society operate, want to shut down our ability to find a melody around us, want to shut down our ability to see the Nikuda Tova in people who are different from us, or people who have different ways of being than us. So in the spirit of that, I'll put my Nikuda Tovot together for the nigun we started with, which was written by my son. He did the first part and my wife the second part. So two Nikuda Tovot together for today. Yum biddy boo bum biddy boo bum ba bo bum. Yum biddy boo bum biddy boo bum ba bo bum. Yum biddy boo bum yai na na nai nai hi hi hi. Ay na nai 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 na nai nai hi hi dum hidi dum dum da da dum dum da da nai nai hi do hidi nai nai da da nai nai da nai 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 hidi nai nai da na nai nai na na nai 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 hidi dum dum da da dum dum ya da di da 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 do. Ay na nay nay ay na na nay nay ay ay nay ay na na nay 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 na na nay nay ay dum hum. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'll turn it over to Rabbi Myers for Kaddish to Rabbanan.
Thank you, Hazzan. Austerklein, for giving us 3 hours worth of material in 30 minutes. I wish we could find a way, perhaps another time, another day, to really get a more full opportunity to delve into these texts without the clock ticking. But we thank you for putting this together and sharing it with us. You should see in the chat screen, for those who need it, click on the link in blue, and you can then join us for Kaddish D'Rabbanan. If you would like, if you're able to rise, I ask you to do it at this time as we recite Kaddish D'Rabbanan together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ololmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'al v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadal v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei Kudusha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Tamidei Hon v'al kol Tamidei Hon v'al kol man b'yaskim b'yaraita di v'yatra hadein v'di v'chol atar v'atar. Yehei lechon u'lechon shlama rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin u'mizonei revichei u'furkana min kodam avohon di v'shmaya v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu barachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. That wraps up this session. Thank you, Hazzan, Austerklein. Thank you, Rabbi Myers. There are some more learning sessions going on this afternoon. And also I just wanted to remind everyone that there will be a gathering in person at 4:30 in Shenley Park. And you can find all that information on 1027healingpartnership.org. So thank you all, and be well.